Thank you for an invitation. Thank you, Marcus, for inviting me for this nice conference. I hope I will not bore you too much today. I will be speaking, I have prepared a lecture for you which relates maybe to your interest, because I will be speaking about beyond X-rays, the dawn of new alchemy. You know, I work, as has been said already, many years in academia, working on quantum field theory. But what I will be describing today is my scientific journey from CERN to alchemy laboratory. I am realizing more and more often that the things what we are doing, and I think also you guys here, is more really alchemy related things. So I work at CERN for many years at Brookhaven National Laboratory in US, in Max Planck Institute, and so on. I was studying the heavy ion collision. I was an expert in ultra-relativistic heavy ion collision. And recently I founded the private laboratory, which is called ELIA. EL stands for Electric Life Academy, and I will explain a lot of later. And this journey is from, kind of the materialistic worldview to the level of consciousness. Good. So I spent most of my life studying the matter, as I said, and what we were actually learning is the behavior of the particles and their interactions, and from that we wanted to kind of to understand what is the basic of reality, right? Because we believe that everything is made from atoms and so on, but the one question remains always without the answer, and that's what the reality is really made of, you know. And if you would be interested, I can give you more, I would say, fundamental answer if you want to learn, but nobody will accept it at the moment. Okay, so we have the Western worldview, which is related to something which we call Big Bang. Everybody believes, I also think that majority of you here, that the reality we are living is was created in the event which is called Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago, where the whole universe and everything we are experiencing now stems from nothing, roughly speaking, and how in the process of expanding of the universe, the planets and galaxies and everything arises, and then we are now left with the universe, which is made of roughly 75% of dark energy, 23% of dark matter, and only 5% or so of the real ordinary matter which we experience. So the prevailing Western view is so-called local realism, objectivism, materialism, and binary logic, right? And you know, after all these years, I realized that the concurrent science is actually inherited from a kind of religion. A religion guy says that the universe was created by God, but nowadays we are saying that the universe emerged from law of nature, but the problem remains the same. You know, who created gods, or God, or who created the laws which are governing the concurrent reality, right? So for me, there is no answer in the kind of mainstream science. So I found it, or we found it with my colleagues, the independent laboratory, ELIA, as I said, the Electric Life Academy, to create a place where the curiosity is more important than the scientific dogma, to bring rigorous experimentation with open-minded exploration, and to follow evidences whenever it may lead. You know, so this is a picture of our office, and that's the kind of laboratory we have. So the main focus is on electricity, electromagnetism, plasma phenomena, consciousness, and new technology. In future, our goal is to fund a centrum which will be similar to what has been mentioned already, CERN, right? The CERN is the Centrum of European Nuclear Research, but we want to fund the Centrum of, not European, of Tesla Research. And we have a lot of schools also. We are doing the open doors visits to our laboratory. So we are also focusing on education, research, self-development, and also longevity. There is a lot of material I can present here, but because the scope of this talk is limited, I just tell you that we are kind of exploring the Asian question with modern tools. So we recently acquired the scanning electron microscope where we can really see amazing things. So as compared to alchemists, they were using the furnaces and crucibles and so on. Today we have electron microscopes, spectroscopy, advanced detectors, and so on. The question, however, remains surprisingly similar. How does the matter transform? So we are really after, and this is so interesting for me at least, you know, that how close alchemist thinking was to understand what's the matter transmutation. You know, so that's one of our goals to understand that. But as for the alchemy, I was inspired a lot by reading books of Giordano Bruno, and he was speaking about 9 levels of blindness. And to my opinion, it's so inspiring, and I see it everywhere, all the time, you know. There are these levels, but you can add your own, right? So these are blindness related to attachment to the authorities, attachment to the tradition, attachment to the sensory perception. We believe that the reality is made from what we can sense, see, hear, and touch. Fear from uncertainty, you know what I'm speaking about, that intellectual pride, I put it in the bold face here, social conformity, dogmatic thinking, and you know, number 9, I think Marcus was also speaking about that, separation from a direct experience. If you will be interested maybe in the coffee break or so, I can elaborate a little bit more what I mean by that. So progress begins when we recognize our own blindness. I think these are the words of Giordano Bruno. Very good. So return of alchemy. You know, I am kind of obsessed with this idea recently because I realized that the modern science is actually inherited the tools and style of thinking from alchemy, but it diverges in a way that all the modern physics research related, for example, to accelerators is based on distraction, right? If we want to study the smallest details of matter, we need to smash them and to see the debris, and from the destructive collision, we are kind of speculating what the matter is kind of made of. This is the same related to cold fusion or other phenomena where we go with the brutal force kind of to convince nature to do something for us. But alchemists and some other people, I will speak about that later, went rather a different approach, that people were trying to find the harmony and to cooperate or collaborate with nature rather than break it through. So my kind of the best example of that was Nikola Tesla, who was probably the last natural philosopher. And he was also kind of engineer, scientist, but also philosopher. And he actually brought me to the idea, which I cannot admire more than I do, is that the electricity is the first manifestation of spirit in the real world. And You know, I'm doing a lot of lectures for students and so about the electricity, and I'm always asking, do you understand what the electricity is? And everybody says, yes, this is so simple. We have the sockets, you know, you put your cord into it and it works. But I realized after so many years that really nobody ever really experience what the electricity is, because if you stuck your finger into the socket, you get burned, but this is not the electricity, but this is a consequence of being electricity present at the moment, but the burns are not related to electricity in the direct way. So the electricity, so I believe now, and I don't push you to believe me as well, but I believe that all what we are seeking, the kind of spiritual transcendental truth, is the electricity. Electricity is the most fundamental working wheel of the universe. Okay, but sure, that's my opinion. So from Tesla to plasma, we realize that the manifestation of the electricity in terms of plasmatic discharges reveals living objects, right? For example, here that's the discharge of 400,000 volts, which suddenly, you know that the high voltage is very dangerous, but suddenly in this level with some frequency and so on, you can now suddenly see that the electricity behaves like, is it the roots of some, you know, living plants or things like that. We see a lot of structure which is related to golden ratio, to same geometry and the fractality. So it is so extremely interesting, and we can see really that the electromagnetic plasma has a lot to do with the living systems, right? We also, our body is water and electricity. Why plasma? Because the plasma is most common state of matter in the universe. 99% of all universe is made of plasma, no matter, no atoms, plasma, right? It is a bridge, it is a bridge between the matter and energy, but to my opinion, between the matter and the spirit. Source of self-organization. Plasma has the ability of self-organizing itself, right? And the possible gateway to the new physical phenomena. So I will come to that. So we have one of the amazing application we have discovered kind of year ago, that there was a forgotten patent of Nikola Tesla, which is called shadow graph. So we have now a shadow graph project. So what you see here is the glass tube, simple, empty, like a light bulb. If you remember, before the LED era, we had the light bulbs with the tungsten wire inside, and the size of the tube is roughly similar to the light bulb, right? Tesla patented in 1894 a glass tube with a single electrode, which is so simple that you can't believe, you know. So it's even more simpler than the light bulb with the tungsten wire. And what he observed, that if there is a special kind of way of powering this tube, it generates a radiation which has the same properties as the gamma rays or the Röntgen device. And this kind of plot or this picture shows the Röntgen of seemingly Tesla's food, but we don't know exactly. But we know that this tube generates very special radiation which has the ability to you know, to pass through the material and be partially absorbed in the similar way as a Röntgen, right? But what happened a year later, that also Röntgen discovered radiation which has the same property, and I call it scientific bifurcation, that somehow it happens in the history of science so many times that that the path split it, and more or less the same discoveries were forgotten, and one was now flooded the whole world. So I mean, everybody has experience with Röntgen device, but the Tesla discovery was for more than 130 years forgotten, right? Also, it was patented and so on. So what we have done 130 years ago, that we have revisited the Tesla's experiment with modern scientific instrumentation, and I couldn't believe myself, you know, such a, you certainly know how the Röntgen looks like. It's very expensive, you know, there are cables with the electricity, thousands of watts, you know, the cables are thick like my hand, very power consumption, very expensive, right, and danger, right? And in this situation, we have really a simple glass tube filled with vacuum in the special, when it's powered in the special condition, it generates the plasma inside, and the plasma itself miraculously has the ability to generate a radiation which penetrates through the living tissues and doesn't harm the DNA, unlike the Röntgen radiation. You know, 130 years ago, we are hurting ourselves with X-rays, and we could have this tube where every pregnant woman could be scanned with this tube because it doesn't harm the DNA, right? I couldn't believe that still, you know, sorry for this excitement, but you know, the system, it's so simple. You know, we have some power supply, high voltage power supply. We actually usually built it from the transformer extracted from the old microwave oven, you know, MOT. So very simple, couple of euros, or what you say, Tesla transformer, then the shadow graph emission lamp, and then we have a detection system, which is usually photofluorescent screen, which converts the invisible light into the visible spectrum, and we then observe the photoluminescent screen with the standard normal camera. The whole system we have simplified recently can be powered by battery. You see, you have a Röntgen, you put the 4 battery, which, you know, batteries which are inside here, and it generates radiation where you can Röntgen your body, you can scan your body. And it weighs 5 kilo altogether. So we are dreaming now. I promised to our investors, so then before the beginning of summer, we will produce a pocket-size Röntgen which you can have on your keys, you know. So if, no, I'm kidding, you know, but it will be really small, you know. So these are the experiments we do in, this is from winter this year, so we call it the laboratory mouse, right, experiments. So you put the mouse, you know, in front of the shadow graph tubes, and you see the aestheticals and everything inside. The same is my hand, you know, so it works very easily. In a couple of seconds after you switch the power on, you see very nice bright image, and this we have even didn't start the development. You know, that's the very old, simple kind of camera. Nowadays, you know, dentists and so they are using expensive, you know, very nice cameras, whatever, right? So this is under construction. Oh, there are some very amazing and interesting phenomena related to the shadow graph operation. For me as a physicist, it opens entirely new kind of phenomena. For example, on this picture is not that nicely visible, but the plasma generates something like a standing waves inside the tube, and they are very nicely visible kind of structures, like very sharp circles, which are probably also source of that radiation. And if you take a picture with your mobile phone, like iPhone or so, we have realized, you know, these are the layers of blindness. At the beginning, I thought that there is some noise. You know, I saw the spots, and that's the blindness, And after a while, I was wondering what these spots actually mean. So we enlarged it and we realized that it has a very peculiar structure, which is known as exotic vacuum objects. Nobody knows what it exactly is, but this is EVOS, exotic vacuum objects. We did, sorry for bothering you with the scientific data, but we did some modern tests with silicon pixels detectors, which are kind of expensive devices, but they are able to measure the energy spectrum, the angular distribution, and things like that. And we realized that the majority of the radiation, which is similar to the X-rays, is produced with the energy about 15 keV. I don't know whether you are familiar with Röntgen or so, right? So this is rather soft kind of radiation. But there is also a tail which goes up to, it depends on the statistic, it's exponential tails with the average energy 44 keV, which is impossible, I tell you. All my physics I know, you can ask whomever you like. It's impossible to generate 44 keV and higher photons with that simple tube and with that simple device, impossible, right? And we also, this is slightly more complex, but that's the last technical slide. If we study the attenuation, so you have, for example, X-ray source, which generates the incident field, and you put some absorber, some absorption material, it can be human body, obviously, then what's happening with the standard X-ray radiation, that the photons of low energy are all absorbed, right? And only the high energy photon make it through. So this phenomenon is known hardering. You can see it on that, this is a distribution in logarithmic scale of the incident gamma on the Röntgen incident energy distribution. And if you put in between the source and the detector 4 millimeter aluminum slab, then you see this is exactly what happened with that blue, right, line. The intensity is obviously reduced, but the all high energy X-rays make it through, they penetrate, but the low energy are absorbed, right? But the shadow graph seems to be impacted by the material, Nobody understands that. That's so amazing. It's really something very completely different than from the X-ray. So after the shadow graph make it through the material, the intensity is also reduced, but the energy spectrum is essentially the same. Think about how you can use it, the doctors, how they can use it, for example, in the medical examination and so on. Right, so I think I am coming closer to the end. That's the very preliminary results. We did this measurement 2 days ago, and so I don't have nice data and so on, but you see this shape. This is a kind of Röntgen spectroscopy picture of the source of the radiation emitted from the tube. And you can actually see, that would be the original tube if you would see it on your naked eye. And here is the electrode, the single electrode, which is invisible. It means that the shadow graph radiation doesn't come from the electrode, but really comes from the plasma itself. From the plasma. Nobody has ever seen such an effect in the history. We also did very preliminary results with the Griffin Brook from Los Angeles. We have compared experimentally the effect of the shadow graph radiation with respect to the X-ray. So we used the cold cathode X-ray tube, and we measured, he measured the effect of the radiation radiating the reddish seeds, and he saw very preliminary indication that here is the dose radiated on the seeds, and if you expose the seeds by the standard X-ray, he really saw the declination trend, but with the shadow graph, look, within the error bus seems to be that the seeds seems to be impacted by that, right? So this is very preliminary. I want to, only for those who will be interested, we have also some similar device which is called Elify. This is a device also using the similar technology as we have for the shadow graph, but there are two tubes which are actually generating the plasma, which is rotating in kind of one in clockwise and the other one in counterclockwise direction. And we use also these tubes, which we believe generate something like a scalar field, which can be related to electric sound. And this is kind of new way of plasma healing. We have tremendous results with that. If somebody of you will be interested, we can speak about that later. Okay, so it brings me to a summary. Is it okay? That shadow graph is, to my opinion, groundbreaking phenomenon, not only from the physics point of view, but also from the point of view of a healing and all the possible area where you can use it. Sorry. Oh, no, you see, so how to get it back? So, yeah. I hit something. I can see, maybe you all come here. No, sorry. Okay, I will read it for you. So, it is a completely new physics, suggests a previously unrecognized type of radiation. Look, I am a physicist, but I believe that you must understand that after these, 100 years of exploration of large hadron colliders and I don't know what, we were seeking for so-called beyond standard model. We wanted to see if there is something more than, electromagnetic, weak, nuclear and gravitational attraction, right? And after all these years in the small private laboratory, and we have it, right? I don't know, look, I cannot be amazed more than I am, right? Then the radiation seems to pose no harm to the human body. I know that these results are very preliminary, but when I saw the kind of physical properties of the radiation, and I see that's completely different than from what you would expect from X-ray radiation, then myself, I don't have any doubts that this is something else and it will be much more gentle to the human bodies than the X-rays. And also I see a vast field of application from detectoscopy, medicine, whatever. My dream is that if everything will be more or less okay, after, I don't know, X and Y years, every doctor in small village everywhere can have the small pocket-sized device to see for the first examination, and if he saw something strange, then he can ship the person to the client to the X-ray examination. You see. Anyway, so I think that's okay. So let's start from scratch again. Okay. So no, that's it. Thank you.